Have you ever had a powerful realization, a time where you made a clear decision to change, and then found you were feeling anxious, exhausted, or oddly stuck instead of expanded? Well, welcome to the Expansion Room. I'm your host, Shervon Laurice, and today we are going to be talking about that very issue. Most people think that something has gone wrong when growth starts to feel heavy. And in this episode, I am going to explain how integration stabilizes expansion so that your body does not have to fight the life that you're trying to build. So let's dive in. Why does expansion without integration feel so overwhelming? All right, so that's really the core question of today's episode. We're in January of a brand new year, and most people either set what they call New Year's resolutions or New Year's intentions. I tend to go on the side of intentions. And people make decisions about how they want and desire to change their lives, their businesses, their careers, maybe the relationships in their lives. And as they start to put things in place, oftentimes they begin to feel a bit exhausted by it, or maybe a little paralyzed by it, or start to procrastinate on the very things that they said they wanted to change. So, and oftentimes this is all about like us growing and expanding into the person that we want to be. So why does growth feel sometimes like it's unsafe, even when it's something that we really want? Well, because the nervous system is always oriented towards the familiar, not what is best for us or aligned or even expansive. Your nervous system's primary job is not to help you evolve, believe it or not. Its job is to really keep you alive. Think back to prehistoric times, and we had to pay attention to our environment in order for us to stay safe, like not picking the wrong types of fruits and vegetables that would possibly kill us, or always paying attention to the animal life around us or the environment itself and its changing landscape, right, in order to stay alive. And so nowadays, for most of us modern human beings who are living either in cities, suburbs, or near cities and suburbs, we don't really have all that much that we have to pay attention to in reference to what is keeping us alive or how we are able to keep ourselves alive. But that part of our nervous system still exists. And it is often scanning for safety. And when we make a decision to do something new, to do something different, to step into maybe a new identity for ourselves, our nervous systems kind of heighten as we make moves towards that because it's unfamiliar. It's new. And in previous episodes, we talked about how destabilizing a new decision can be in our lives and how embodiment is the answer to that destabilization, like making embodied choices and decisions where that feeling and that sense of who we are becoming becomes part of our bodies. It becomes part of our lived experience, not just intellectual. But there's a piece in between that we haven't talked about, and that is integration. And that's what helps us to get to embodiment. So our central nervous system scans for predictability, not possibility. And when we're stepping into something new, We are looking at possibility. So even when growth is conscious and it's desired, if it represents something that's unfamiliar territory, your system can register it as a threat. This is why expansion can feel, for some people, edgy or activating or destabilizing. I know for me, over my years of in my career, especially as a therapist and moving into being a coach, each major shift that I would make it with my mind first. And there was always some level of anxiety, angst, tension, some sort of destabilizing feeling that would arise in me. In the early days, I did not recognize this at all. I just felt like, oh, that's just me and I need to push through. And now, in these last probably 5 or 6 years since I've also become a coach, I now know that feeling whenever I make a new decision, when I'm about to step into something new, and my whole system goes, whoa, what are we doing and why? Is this necessary? And so I now have learned this is a part of the way my system functions. And it does for so many people, but we don't always recognize it. Our society says, oh, there's something wrong with that. You got to push through that. But your system has not yet learned that this new way of being is safe, that this new idea that you're stepping into, this new desire or vision is safe for you. Familiar patterns, even painful ones, feel safer than the unknown because they are predictable. The nervous system would rather repeat what it knows than risk what it doesn't know yet. It doesn't trust it yet. So this is where integration becomes essential. Integration is how the body learns that expansion does not equal danger, that growth does not require collapse, and that change can be held without losing safety, connection, or stability. So until that learning happens within your system, growth can feel unsafe, even when it's deeply desired. Your system is not resisting expansion. It is asking for pacing, right? Pacing, slowing down maybe, or addressing what is coming up, safety, or even coherent. So for me, in the days of being a business owner of a small private practice and moving into being a coach, every time I would make a shift and that feeling would come up, especially in the early days of business ownership, I would push through. And now I pause and I kind of check in with myself. And I have learned that this process enables me to move forward with more ease, with more grace. And so, what is integration? Integration is the process by which your nervous system learns that a new insight, a new desire or decision or way of being is safe enough to become normal, to become basically the status quo, to become your new emerging self. It is not a mental activity. It is something that you move towards, but it's not something that you figure out intellectually. Integration is how change moves from being something that you understand in your mind's eye to something that your body trusts. And when integration is happening, your system is learning through lived experience, repetition, and nervous system regulation that does not need to be braced or protected or even to revert to go backwards, right? So integration is this process by which we can go beyond reflection and we can go beyond rest, right? So a lot of times you'll hear people talk about, well, integration is the process of taking some time to rest and reflect on the new decision or the new activity that you've stepped into. And while that is true to some level, reflection does help you to make meaning of a new decision or a new path or a new action or activity or a new identity. And rest does help you recover. But integration is something different. Integration teaches your nervous system how to hold change. It teaches your nervous system how to hold change without going into survival mode, right? And so that feeling of survival mode oftentimes activates fight, flight, or freeze, right? And when we're in that state, we are not in the place of openness, ease, acceptance, right? We are more braced for what's coming. What risk is there? I don't know what this is, but we are not moving forward. And your central nervous system will slow you down. The most common thing I hear from people I work with is about procrastination. And I know what that is. I've been there. And when you're in the state of procrastination, when you know there's something that you desire to do or that you're supposed to be stepping into, that is a hard place to be in, right? But integration, when you can pause and step into pacing yourself, repetition of the new actions that you want to put into place, right? It becomes much more manageable. Change becomes much more doable. So repeated small acts that match your new identity is a form of integration. It is really about asking yourself, okay, so based on this new way of living that I want to step into, or this new way of doing business, or opening a new business, what small actions can I take daily to move my nervous system forward to acceptance, right? And that helps you then to step more with ease into your new identity. Regulating your nervous system while doing something unfamiliar is also another form of integration. Regulating your nervous system is key to keeping you out of fight, flight, or freeze and in parasympathetic nervous system, or even better yet, balanced between the two, right? Your central nervous system side that has fight, flight, or freeze, sympathetic nervous system, is not a bad thing. We need it for our survival, trust. But we're not supposed to be in sympathetic nervous system 24 hours a day or all the hours that we are awake. There should be balance. And it is much easier to make decisions from parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and relax, restore side of our nervous system. Allowing the body to feel activation without abandoning yourself is another form of integration, right? So you're taking these little steps, and maybe to you they feel like baby steps, but you're taking these steps in the pace that feels better, good for you, and you are therefore acknowledging who you are and what you need, not abandoning yourself, not forging ahead and pushing ahead. Another form of integration is choosing presence over performance when things feel stretched. Showing up emotionally for yourself, turning your attention inward and noticing what is coming up for you rather than pushing forward just for performance sake. Integration is active. It is relational, relationship between you and yourself. And it is embodied. It becomes something you can feel and experience within yourself. It is a practice of staying with yourself while living differently. Integration is certainly how my body learns that this new way of living is not a threat, right? When I decided to shift my practice and invite in a new modality of coaching, or when I decided actually to start a podcast, there was definitely that moment of, oh, what are you getting into? But I have learned at this point in my life how to pace myself, how to check in with myself, and how to not abandon myself. All for goals, right? Goals are wonderful. We need them. They help us to grow and expand into our full selves. But we can't allow our goals to drag us down the street. All right? So, with integration, growth stabilizes and choices become natural, and embodiment naturally emerges. So, another thing to think about with integration while you're trying to step into a new identity or move forward your goals is, how does integration stabilize your expansion and step you into another level of your identity? So, or a better way of asking that is, how does integration turn temporary growth into lasting change? All right, so that's another way to think about that question. Integration stabilizes expansion by teaching your nervous system that growth is not a temporary state, but a safe one, right? A repeatable way of living. Most growth experiences create a spike, if you will, a realization, a decision, a moment of clarity, or like what we all like to call the aha moment. But without integration, that spike becomes an isolated moment. The nervous system doesn't know what to do with it in the long term. So it eventually pulls you back to what feels familiar. Integration turns that spike into a baseline. And it does this by repeating new behaviors until they feel normal, right? I think in a couple of episodes ago, I talked about when I was first learning to drive a car. And I didn't learn to drive a car at like age 16. I was already in my last year of college when I decided, oh, I better get a driver's license. I grew up in New York City. We didn't need driver's licenses when I was coming through. But I was in New England for college and realized that if I was going to get a job, I was going to have to drive to work every day. And so it was, I guess, that last semester of school that I decided, okay, I need to get my license. And I was so afraid that I was holding on to the steering wheel for dear life and feeling that tension move up my arms, from my hands up my arms, through my shoulders and along my back. And but I kept at it, even in snowstorms, right? So I was in New England, and I was told by my driving instructor that I was the only student who never canceled for weather. And I looked at him, I said, well, it makes sense for me to learn in your car and not learn in the car that I will buy in the future, because you're right here teaching me how to do it. Why would I cancel? So I learned in the winter of New England, but that for me was doing something that was totally unfamiliar, over and over again. That repetition every week, taking that class, practicing driving until my body recognized that it was no longer unfamiliar. So regulating the body during an unfamiliar activity until it becomes familiar. And then pairing expansion with safety instead of urgency, right? So oftentimes when we make a new decision or create a new vision for ourselves, we are in a hurry in the beginning to get it going. But if we can just pull back a smidge and allow ourselves some space, we can move forward with more grace. Also, allowing identity to update gradually rather than all at once. Sometimes we need to grow into a new idea. Even though that idea popped up in our heads, we may have done all the research, talked to all the people, but if our central nervous systems have not settled into that new idea, integrated that new idea, then it's going to be a longer haul. But when we can allow that identity to upgrade gradually, right? To update gradually rather than all at once, then over time the system stops asking, is this dangerous? Is this safe? And it starts asking, is this who we are now? Is this who we are now? That is the shift from temporary growth to lasting change. I think for me, when I was much, much younger, and I didn't have language, of course, at that time for any of this, coming from where I lived in New York City, it wasn't the best of neighborhoods, but and this was the mid 80s. The crack era had already started. It wasn't the worst of neighborhoods, but it also wasn't the best of neighborhoods. But one thing I had in my mind was, I'm going to college. I always knew I wanted to go to college because I knew that education was my way to a new identity. And when I got to college in New England, some level of shell shock was definitely there. But I allowed myself to partake and step into so many unfamiliar things. And when you're living on campus, it allows you to do some of those things at your own pace. And classes were a gradual introduction to that new identity. And so that was my first shift in identity long before I knew what that meant, right? But I never moved back to the old neighborhood because the person that I became in college meant that I was going to be doing something else, living somewhere else, and engaging in my life in a new and different way. Why this creates identity level change for most people is that it is able to stick, right? Lasting change is not created by intensity, it is created by familiarity. Integration helps to build familiarity with your expanded self or your new identity. And the more often your body experiences new choices without collapse and growth without overwhelm, along with visibility without danger, the more your nervous system recalibrates when it feels normal or what feels normal. Eventually, the change no longer requires effort, no longer requires motivation. It just becomes embodied. Integration turns expansion from an event into an identity. And this reframes the whole growth process, right? Because oftentimes when we share with other people what our new intentions are or what our new identity is that we're stepping into, what the growth edge is, they watch us. They watch carefully. And some people watch in judgment. And when you make a decision but then hesitate or procrastinate, or you allow for anxiety to take hold to just get you to a place where you feel stuck and you can't move forward, people will watch, right? So if change has not lasted for you in the past, and I've had these moments in my life, if change has not lasted for you in the past, it is not because you did not want it badly enough, which is something that people might say to you. Oh, you must not have wanted that badly enough if you didn't get up off your butt to do da 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 da. It is because your system had not yet learned to hold that change. That is all that it is. And so we spend, especially as entrepreneurs, when we come to this place that we might call failure, we beat ourselves up. Instead of taking note that maybe it's just our nervous system needing to be paced. Integration is the missing link that allows growth to become sustainable, grounded, and real. So keep that in mind. Now, there are signs that you might be expanding into a new identity or a new way of being in your life faster than you are integrating. And so there may be a need for rebalance. So how do you know when your system needs integration instead of more effort? There may be emotional signs like irritability, doubt. Doubt has been this thing that has shown up in my life whenever I've made a big decision. Doubt shows up, and that it's completely normal. Numbness, overthinking. There may be physical signs like fatigue, tension, shallow breathing, which is usually a sign of anxiety, restlessness, or behavioral changes like rushing, like you're pushing yourself, self-pressure, right? Or questioning over and over again your decisions. So there are simple ways to slow expansion without abandoning your growth. One thing that you can do is to reduce the size of what you're taking on, what you're shifting, what you're stepping into, right? You may have a bigger picture that you're moving towards, but there are always small steps that you need to take in order to get there, right? So reducing the size, not necessarily the direction, right? So you're not stopping your growth, you're just making it smaller, more, as they say, bite size, more repeatable. Take it in smaller increments. Going back to that question I asked you earlier, what's one or two, a few small acts that you can do on a daily basis that can move the needle forward towards your goal? Integration happens when change is experienced in manageable doses for most of us. So this might look like one aligned action per day instead of a full overhaul, right? We all know, we all have been there when we've made the New Year's resolution, I'm going to lose weight today, or I'm going to get into the gym. And we do all the things. January 1st, we clean out our cupboards, we go to Whole Foods and buy all organic, and we go to the gym 5-6 days in a week. We wind up really hungry and probably cranky and sore, in pain, because we did all the things all at once. Instead of saying, okay, what's a couple of things I can do differently in my food choices and meal planning, and I'll start with 1 or 2 days in the gym this week, and then reassess for next week. Something else you can do is practicing a new boundary in one relationship before you practice boundaries in all of them, right? Just choose one. Showing up consistently in a small way rather than pushing visibility everywhere. And I see this in entrepreneurship as well, and especially in social media. I think we as entrepreneurs feel like we have to show up on all of the social media platforms every day or multiple times in a week, and it's not true. Some platforms may not resonate with who you are, and others might. So pick 1 or 2, right? So that you can slowly step into social media and showing up in a way that brings value to other people. Pair your expansion with regulation. That is so key. When we're making change, we're going to need regulation resets for our nervous system so that it recalibrates. And so pair the regulation with the new thing that you're stepping into. If it's more exposure on social media, then take time after to reset yourself, right? Meditation, maybe breath work, maybe a concentration practice, maybe a walk in nature, right? If you are looking to shift relationships that are stressful or may have tension in your life, and you're putting up new boundaries, do something compassionate for yourself. Take a gentle yoga class, a restorative yoga class, right? Think about the things that really help you to feel much more at ease and calm, and pair those things with these new activities. Don't ask your body to expand without support. Anytime you do something new or vulnerable, consciously regulate your nervous system before, during, and after. It can be as simple as turning your attention to your breath. When you are conscious of your breathing, you naturally slow your breath down. And it naturally calms your central nervous system. That's a basic one, right? Slow your breathing before any of these activities, difficult conversations, anything that feels grounding your feet before speaking. Like if you're going to do speaking engagements or speaking in social media or having a hard conversation, ground yourself, right? Set your feet on the floor. Feel your feet. Feel your body in the chair that you're sitting in. Notice 5 things in a room around you. Grounding helps you be present in your body. And then letting your body settle after any activating experience instead of rushing on to the next thing. I believe in buffers. So building in a few minutes or even a 30-minute buffer between activities, if you can, is going to be helpful. And then the third thing in reference to creating integration in your life is stay in relationship with yourself. Integration happens through presence, not pressure. And when growth starts to feel intense or replace self-monitoring and self-judgment with internal contact, that ability to turn inward, to observe what's going on for yourself, and asking yourself, what do I need in this moment? So this might look like over time, noticing what your body's feeling like without trying to fix it. So become the observer in your life. Offer reassurance instead of pushing, right? Be more compassionate with yourself and allowing pauses without interpreting that as failure. Sometimes taking a pause, or what I call a buffer, is good for you. It can help you reset. So slowing down is not a setback. It really is a stabilization strategy. Always keep that in mind. So if you're in a season where things are changing quickly and your body feels like it can't keep up, just know nothing is going wrong. Expansion is meant to be integrated, not endured. When you allow your nervous system to stabilize, then growth and change become sustainable. It becomes embodied and deeply aligned. So if this episode resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on where your system might be asking for more integration rather than acceleration. And if you want more conversations like this, then hang out here in the expansion room. Subscribe to this show on any platform that you're listening or watching. Also, I would invite you to share this episode with someone in your life who may be also navigating growth. And join us in the Expansion Room community on the Circle platform, where we have these kinds of conversations ongoing. And until next time, take care of yourself, be compassionate with yourself,